The arrival on Arcadia Prime. The massive silver arc of the starship Voyager I glided smoothly through the obsidian blackness of space. Commander Ethan Grayson stood at the bridge, gazing out at the approaching planet of Arcadia Prime, his heart pounding in anticipation. Arcadia Prime wasn't just any planet. It was home to one of the most advanced alien civilizations humanity had ever encountered, the Arcadians. Their technology, far beyond anything humans had yet developed, was something the Galactic Federation had been eager to access. But the Arcadians had remained an elusive, enigmatic race, shrouded in mystery and selective in their diplomatic ties. Today, however, that mystery would be unveiled. Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. As Earth's representative and the first human to be granted an official diplomatic mission to Arcadia, he understood the stakes. Humanity's place in the Galactic Federation could change forever if this mission succeeded. If it failed, humanity might be cut off from the technological advancements they so desperately needed. Ethan had prepared for months, studying the Arcadian culture, their history, and their bizarre customs. One thing he hadn't prepared for was the unsettling rumors about the Arcadians' obsession with breeding programs and their strange fascination with the human species. He pushed those thoughts away as his second-in-command, Lieutenant Kara Lynn, approached. Her face was calm, but Ethan could see the same underlying tension in her eyes. "We're entering the Arcadian atmosphere, Commander. ETA 5 minutes, she said, her voice steady but low. Thanks, Kara. Make sure all diplomatic protocols are in place, Ethan replied, pulling himself from the viewport and striding back toward the command console. As the ship descended through the atmosphere, the planet's surface began to reveal itself. Arcadia Prime was a sight to behold, its vast crystalline cities sparkling beneath the golden light of twin suns, surrounded by lush, verdant jungles that stretched far beyond the horizon. The sight was breathtaking, even for someone who had visited countless alien worlds. The beauty was almost surreal, yet there was something eerie about it, something too perfect. "Commander, we have received communication from the Arcadian capital," Kara announced, her fingers dancing across the control panel. "They are expecting us at the Grand Hall of Ancients." "Good," Ethan said, his mind focused. "Alert the team. We're going in." The shuttle descended onto a sleek landing pad, its ramp hissing as it lowered. Ethan adjusted his uniform, feeling the eyes of his team on him. He had selected the best and brightest for this mission: diplomats, linguists, cultural analysts. But the unknown nature of their Arcadian hosts kept everyone on edge. As the team disembarked, they were greeted by a delegation of Arcadians. Their appearance was almost ethereal, their skin smooth and translucent, shimmering faintly under the sunlight. Tall and willowy, they moved with a grace that was almost hypnotic. At the front stood their leader, High Chancellor Seraphia, her gaze piercing as she locked eyes with Ethan. "Welcome, humans," Seraphia said, her voice melodic yet carrying an air of authority. "It is an honor to receive you on Arcadia Prime." "The honor is ours, High Chancellor," Ethan responded, bowing slightly in the customary Arcadian greeting. "We come in peace, with the hope of fostering a long-lasting relationship between our worlds." Seraphia smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes, we have heard much about your kind. The humans, so full of potential." Ethan noticed the way her eyes lingered on him, studying him as if he were an intriguing specimen rather than a guest. He remained composed, though a chill crept up his spine. There was something unsettling in her gaze, something predatory. "The Council is eager to meet you," Seraphia continued, gesturing for them to follow. "We have much to discuss, including a proposal that may benefit both of our species." Ethan nodded, but the words proposal hung ominously in his mind. As they walked through the shimmering corridors of the Arcadian palace, his mind raced with possibilities. What kind of proposal could the Arcadians have in mind? Trade agreements? Technological sharing? Or something more personal? A chilling proposition. The Grand Hall of Ancients was vast and imposing, its walls adorned with symbols and scripts of Arcadian history. At the center of the room sat the council, 12 Arcadians, each cloaked in the ceremonial robes of their station. They watched the human delegation with silent intensity. As they took their places, High Chancellor Seraphia stepped forward, raising her arms in a gesture of welcome. Today marks a historic moment for both our species. Arcadia Prime has long observed the evolution of humanity with great interest. Your resilience, your adaptability, it is truly remarkable. Ethan nodded politely, though he could sense there was something more behind her words. And now, Seraphia continued, her voice taking on a more serious tone, we believe it is time for our two species to unite, in a more biological sense. Ethan blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. Biological sense, he repeated, trying to keep his voice neutral. Seraphia's violet eyes gleamed as she looked directly at him. We propose a breeding program, Commander Grayson. Our species, though advanced, is declining in fertility. We have studied your genetics extensively, and we believe that the combination of human and Arcadian DNA could lead to a new, stronger hybrid species, one that could secure the future of both our peoples. The room fell deathly silent. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he processed her words. A breeding program. With humans, he glanced around at his team, seeing the shock and confusion mirrored on their faces. I don't understand, Ethan stammered, choosing his words carefully. You want to create a hybrid race using humans. Seraphia smiled, as if this were the most natural suggestion in the world. Yes, we have selected you, Commander Grayson, to be the first. You will sire the next generation of Arcadians. Ethan's stomach churned. This wasn't diplomacy. This was something far more dangerous. He had walked into a trap, and now, it seemed, they wanted to use him, and potentially all of humanity, as nothing more than breeding stock for their dying race. With all due respect, High Chancellor, Ethan said slowly, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside, this is not something we can agree to without careful consideration and discussion. Seraphia's smile faded. Consideration, she repeated, her tone hardening. Commander, this is not a request. It is an expectation. We have extended our hand in friendship, and now we expect your cooperation. The Arcadian Council watched, their expressions unreadable. Ethan's mind raced. He had to get his team out of here, but he couldn't afford to provoke a hostile response. He needed time to think, time to plan, and time, it seemed, was quickly running out. Perhaps we can continue this discussion in a more private setting, Ethan suggested, his diplomatic training taking over. There is much to consider, and I believe further talks are needed before any decisions are made. Seraphia studied him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. Then, with a wave of her hand, she dismissed the council. Very well, Commander. We shall continue this discussion tomorrow. But know this, our patience has limits. Do not test them. Ethan bowed his head, his heart pounding. As he and his team were escorted back to their quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were now prisoners on Arcadia Prime, and that the real danger had only just begun. Trapped on Arcadia Prime, the doors to their quarters closed with a soft hiss, sealing Commander Ethan Grayson and his team inside. The tension in the air was palpable. Everyone was silent for a moment, trying to digest what had just transpired in the Grand Hall of Ancients. Ethan paced across the room, his brow furrowed with worry, while the rest of the team exchanged uneasy glances. Did she just say what I think she said? Lieutenant Carolyn broke the silence, her voice edged with disbelief. She was normally composed, but even she was visibly rattled. Yeah, she did, Ethan replied, rubbing the back of his neck in frustration. A breeding program. This wasn't diplomacy, it was a trap. Dr. Harris, the team's gynobiologist, who had been quiet up to this point, cleared his throat. This could explain a lot. The Arcadians' declining fertility rates, their obsession with genetics. It's not unheard of in galactic history for species to try to preserve themselves by hybridizing with others, but to force this on us, it's madness. Madness. Kara scoffed, pacing alongside Ethan. This isn't just madness. It's a violation of everything we stand for. We didn't come here to be breeding stock. Ethan held up a hand to calm her. We need to stay focused. Panicking isn't going to help us. Kara stopped, taking a deep breath. You're right. But what's the plan, Commander? We can't just sit here and wait for them to decide our fate. Ethan crossed his arms and stared out the window at the alien skyline. For now, we need to play along. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and on an unfamiliar planet. If we try to escape or resist openly, it could spark a diplomatic incident that humanity can't afford. We need to figure out how to get off this planet without causing an intergalactic war. Dr. Harris stepped forward, concern written on his face. Commander, if their fertility crisis is as bad as they claim, they won't let us leave so easily. They might resort to more drastic measures. Ethan's jaw clenched. He had thought about that. There was no telling how far the Arcadians were willing to go to ensure the survival of their species. He had seen desperation lead to dangerous choices before, but this was unprecedented. I'm well aware, Doctor, Ethan said, which is why we need to buy time. We'll act cooperative for now, but we need to gather intel. We need to know more about their technology, their infrastructure, and most importantly, any weaknesses we can exploit. Kara frowned. And how do you suggest we do that without tipping them off? Ethan's gaze hardened. We'll have to split up. Dr. Harris, I want you to study everything you can about their biology. If there's a scientific solution to their fertility issue, we need to find it. Maybe there's a way to help them without involving humans. Understood. Dr. Harris nodded, already thinking of possible solutions. Kara, you're with me. We'll try to get access to their communications network. I need to find out if we're really the first humans they've tried this with, and whether we have any allies out there. Kara raised an eyebrow. Do you think they've done this before? Ethan's expression darkened. I wouldn't be surprised. If they've been watching humanity for as long as they say, it's possible they've taken volunteers before. A chill ran through the room at the thought. Before they could continue planning, there was a sudden chime at the door. The team froze, exchanging wary glances. Ethan gestured for them to stay calm as he approached the door. It slid open to reveal an Arcadian standing in the hallway. She was tall, her skin shimmering faintly in the soft light, her expression calm but unreadable. The High Chancellor has requested your presence for a private dinner, Commander Grayson, the Arcadian said. Her voice was soft, but there was an undeniable authority behind it. Ethan forced a neutral smile. Of course, tell the High Chancellor I'll be there shortly. The Arcadian nodded and left without another word. Kara shot Ethan a look. A private dinner? That sounds like a trap if I've ever heard one. Ethan sighed. I don't have a choice. If I refuse, it'll raise suspicion. I need to keep them thinking I'm willing to cooperate. And what if she tries to force the issue? Kara asked, her concern evident. You can't exactly negotiate your way out of that. I'll handle it, Ethan said, though he wasn't entirely sure how. In the meantime, you and Dr. Harris start gathering information. We need to find a way out of here. As Ethan prepared to leave for the dinner, his thoughts raced. He had faced difficult missions before, but this was something entirely different. The stakes were higher than ever, not just for him, but for humanity's future. If the Arcadians succeeded in their plan, it could alter the course of human history in ways he couldn't even begin to imagine. A dangerous dance. Ethan followed the Arcadian attendant down a series of corridors, his mind still racing. The architecture of the palace was stunning, almost surreal in its alien beauty, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every now and then, he caught glimpses of Arcadian guards stationed discreetly along the way, their glowing eyes following his every move. Finally, they arrived at a grand set of doors, intricately carved with symbols that Ethan couldn't decipher. The doors slid open, revealing a lavish dining hall bathed in soft, golden light. At the center of the room was a long table, adorned with delicacies that looked both beautiful and strange, and seated at the head of the table was High Chancellor Seraphia. Commander Grayson, she greeted with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm so pleased you accepted my invitation." Ethan nodded respectfully. "Thank you for the invitation, High Chancellor. It's an honor." "Please call me Seraphia," she said, gesturing for him to take a seat beside her. "We are past formalities, aren't we?" Ethan forced a smile and sat down, his body tense, but his mind alert. He knew he was walking a fine line here. One wrong move could jeopardize everything. As the dinner began, Seraphia made small talk, asking about Earth and its customs, but it didn't take long for the conversation to shift to more serious matters. "I sense your hesitation, Commander," she said, her violet eyes locking onto his. "You fear what we have proposed." Ethan took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "It's not fear, High Chancellor Seraphia. It's simply a matter of diplomacy. Such a proposition requires careful consideration. Humanity values its autonomy, and such decisions can't be made lightly." Seraphia leaned back in her chair, studying him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "I understand your caution, Commander, but I urge you to see this as an opportunity. A chance for humanity to transcend its limitations, to join with us in creating something greater." Ethan met her gaze, his mind racing. "I appreciate your perspective, but surely there are other ways we can assist each other. We don't need to resort to biological integration." Seraphia's smile faded, and her eyes took on a harder edge. "I'm afraid time is not on our side, Commander. Our species is dying. We cannot afford to wait for long diplomatic discussions. We need action." Ethan's heart pounded. This was the moment of truth. He needed to find a way to stall, to buy more time without pushing the Arcadians too far. "Perhaps we can come to a compromise," Ethan suggested, his voice steady. "We can work together to find a solution that benefits both our species without forcing anyone into something they're not ready for." Seraphia's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded. "Very well, Commander. I will give you time to consider our proposal, but do not delay for too long. Our patience is not infinite." As the dinner concluded, Ethan stood, bowing his head respectfully. "Thank you, High Chancellor. I will give your words the consideration they deserve." Seraphia's smile returned, though it was tinged with an unspoken warning. "I look forward to hearing your decision." As Ethan left the dining hall and made his way back to his quarters, his mind was racing. He had bought them a little more time, but it wouldn't last. The Arcadians were growing desperate, and desperate beings made dangerous choices. They needed to find a way off Arcadia Prime, and fast. The clock was ticking. Desperate measures and hidden allies. Ethan returned to the quarters, his mind spinning with everything that had transpired during the tense dinner with High Chancellor Seraphia. The Arcadians were not just desperate, they were running out of time. If they were willing to resort to such extreme measures as forced breeding programs, who knew what else they were capable of? His team needed answers, and fast. As the door slid open, Ethan found Kara and Dr. Harris already at work, deep in conversation over their data paths. Kara looked up as he entered. How did it go? Did she push for the same proposition? Ethan let out a long breath and sat down. "Yeah, she did. But I bought us some time. Seraphia's patience is running thin, though. We need to find a way off this planet soon." Dr. Harris, still tapping away at his datapad, interjected, "We might have a problem, Commander. Their medical tech is far more advanced than we thought. I managed to get a glimpse of some of their files. They've been experimenting with human DNA for decades." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? They've been running experiments on humans." Harris nodded gravely. "It's all there in their data archives. They've been studying human genetic material for years, trying to integrate it with their own. I haven't found any evidence that they succeeded, but the mere fact that they've been doing it is troubling. Kara's expression darkened. So we're not the first humans they've tried to manipulate. No, Harris replied, his voice heavy. And it looks like they've been desperate to find a solution. Their fertility rates have dropped by over 90% in the past century. They're facing extinction if they don't find a way to adapt. Ethan's mind raced. It all made sense now. Their insistence, their desperation. But that didn't change the fact that they had no right to use humanity as their genetic saviors. We need to get out of here before they decide to take matters into their own hands. But how? Kara asked, pacing in frustration. We're on a planet with technology that makes ours look like ancient history. Their defenses are airtight, and they're watching our every move. Ethan rubbed his temples, trying to think. There had to be a way. They needed leverage, something that could force the Arcadians to let them go. But what could they possibly use against a race this advanced? Then it hit him. Their fertility crisis, Ethan said, his voice low but intense. It's the one thing they're vulnerable to. If we can find a way to offer them a solution, one that doesn't involve turning humans into breeding stock, they might be willing to negotiate. Dr. Harris raised an eyebrow. That's a tall order, Commander. Even with their advanced tech, they haven't found a solution yet. What makes you think we can? We have to try, Ethan said, standing up and beginning to pace. We've got one advantage they don't, outside perspective. Maybe they're too close to the problem to see the solution. Kara nodded, catching on. We could propose a joint research initiative. We help them solve their fertility issue without compromising human autonomy. In return, they let us leave peacefully. It's a long shot, Harris admitted, but it's better than nothing. Ethan looked at them both, determination hardening his resolve. It's the only shot we've got. Dr. Harris, I want you to focus on their medical data. See if there's any hint of a solution they might have overlooked. Kara, try to access their communication network again. We need to know if there are any other species out there that have faced similar issues. Maybe we can find an ally. As the team got to work, Ethan stepped out onto the balcony, the cool night air brushing against his face. The twin moons of Arcadia Prime hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the crystalline city below. From here, everything looked peaceful, beautiful even. But Ethan knew the truth. Beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Whispers in the dark hours passed, and Ethan's mind remained restless. He hadn't slept in nearly 24 hours, but the adrenaline coursing through his veins kept him alert. There was too much at stake to rest now. Just as he was about to head back inside, Kara appeared on the balcony, her face grim but focused. I've got something, she said, her voice low. Ethan straightened. What is it? Kara handed him her datapad, displaying an encrypted communication log. I managed to hack into their internal communications network. It wasn't easy. They've got security layers that would take a team of Earth's best coders weeks to crack. But I found something interesting. Ethan scanned the datapad. The log showed a series of messages between Seraphia and someone else, someone off-world. The messages were cryptic, but the tone was clear. Seraphia was negotiating with another species, one that had faced a similar fertility crisis in the past. And that species had found a solution. They're talking to the Xonrians, Kara explained. A species from the far side of the galaxy. They went through a fertility collapse about 1,000 years ago, but they managed to save themselves through genetic engineering. The Arcadians are trying to get their hands on that technology. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Why didn't they tell us this during the negotiations? Because they want us as a backup, Kara said. If the deal with the Xonrians falls through, they're planning to use us. They're hedging their bets, Commander. Ethan's mind raced. This was the leverage they needed. If the Arcadians had an alternative to their plan, it weakened their position. They might not need humans after all. We need to make contact with the Xonrians, Ethan said. If we can convince them to step in, it could give us the upper hand. If they've already solved this issue, they might be willing to help us. Kara frowned. But how do we reach them? The Arcadians are monitoring all outgoing transmissions. Ethan smirked. We don't need to use Arcadian tech. We've got a backup transmitter on the shuttle. It's old tech, but it's secure. The Arcadians won't be able to trace it. Kara's eyes lit up with understanding. You're thinking we send a message to the Xonrians directly? Exactly, Ethan said. We offer them a deal. If they help us, we'll ensure that the Arcadians don't interfere with their negotiations. It's risky, but it might be our only shot. Kara nodded. I'll prep the transmitter. It's going to take a bit of time to get through the Arcadian security net, but I'll get it done. As she headed back inside, Ethan leaned against the balcony railing, his mind buzzing with the possibilities. If the Xonrians came through, they could turn the tables on the Arcadians. But if they didn't, well, that was a scenario Ethan didn't want to think about. The unexpected ally. The next morning, Ethan awoke to the sound of his comm buzzing. Kara's face appeared on the screen, her eyes wide with excitement. Commander, you need to see this, she said, her voice barely containing her urgency. Ethan quickly dressed and made his way to the control room, where Kara and Dr. Harris were waiting. Kara pointed to the comm station, where a message was displayed. It was from the Xonrians. They responded, Kara said, barely able to keep the disbelief out of her voice. They're willing to help. Ethan's eyes widened. What's the catch? They want the Arcadians to agree to share their genetic research in exchange for the fertility solution, Kara explained. The Xonrians aren't doing this out of charity. They're interested in advancing their own scientific knowledge. Ethan nodded. That's reasonable, and it might be enough to get the Arcadians off our backs. Dr. Harris, who had been quietly working on his own research, looked up. There's something else you should know, Commander. I've been digging through the Arcadian data. I think I found a flaw in their genetic approach. They've been focusing on hybridization, but their fertility issue is actually related to an environmental factor, a type of radiation on Arcadia Prime that's slowly sterilizing their population. Ethan blinked in surprise. They don't know. Harris shook his head. I don't think they've figured it out yet, but if we present this information to them, along with the Xonrian offer, we might be able to get them to back off completely. Ethan's mind raced. They finally had the pieces they needed, the Xonrian solution and the truth about the Arcadian fertility crisis. Now, it was time to act. Let's call a meeting with Seraphia, Ethan said, his voice filled with renewed determination. It's time to put all our cards on the table. The team nodded in agreement, their expressions a mix of relief and determination. The stakes were still high, but now, for the first time, they had a real chance of turning the situation around. As they prepared for the meeting, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. The Arcadians were desperate, but now, so was he, desperate to protect his team. The diplomatic gambit. The meeting with High Chancellor Seraphia had been arranged for midday in the Grand Hall of Ancients. Ethan could feel the weight of what was about to happen pressing on his shoulders. The stakes had never been higher. Either they would find a way to resolve the crisis peacefully, or the Arcadians would force their hand, leaving humanity with few options but to fight back. Ethan glanced at his team as they made their way through the winding corridors of the Arcadian palace. Kara was calm and focused, her hands firmly gripping her datapad, ready to present their findings. Dr. Harris walked beside her, clutching a small device that contained the crucial information about the environmental factors affecting Arcadian fertility. Both of them understood the gravity of the situation. They had to present the truth carefully, without triggering the Arcadians' desperation. As they approached the towering doors of the Grand Hall, Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken. He knew that Seraphia was expecting more than what they were prepared to offer. But now they had something far more powerful than a simple rejection of her demands. They had the truth, and the Xonrians' offer of a genuine solution. Whether the Arcadians would listen was a different question entirely. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the vast hall once more. The Arcadian council sat in their usual positions, their piercing eyes watching the humans' every move. At the center of the room, Seraphia stood with a regal grace, her violet eyes locking onto Ethan the moment he stepped inside. "Commander Grayson," Seraphia said, her voice smooth but edged with impatience, "I trust you've had time to consider our proposal." Ethan took a deep breath and stepped forward, maintaining an air of calm despite the intensity of the moment. "High Chancellor, we have considered your proposal carefully. But before we continue, there are some critical discoveries that we must share with you, discoveries that could change the course of our negotiations." Seraphia's eyes narrowed slightly, but she gestured for him to continue. "Go on." Para stepped forward, holding up her datapad. "We've accessed information about your ongoing negotiations with Exonrians. We know that they have offered a solution to your fertility crisis, one that doesn't involve human genetic material. The Exonrians have agreed to share their genetic engineering technology with you, provided you're willing to collaborate on research." A murmur swept through the council, their previously stoic expressions betraying a flicker of surprise. Seraphia's gaze hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You've been spying on our communications," Ethan quickly interjected, keeping his tone diplomatic. "We were forced to act in our own defense, High Chancellor. Your proposal left us with no choice but to explore all possible options. But this doesn't have to be a confrontation. We believe that the Xonrian technology offers a peaceful, mutually beneficial solution for both our species." Seraphia's violet eyes burned with intensity as she regarded him, but she remained silent. The council members exchanged looks, clearly processing the new information. Dr. Harris stepped forward next, holding the small device that contained his findings. "In addition to the Xonrian offer, we've discovered something that may have been overlooked in your own research. Your fertility crisis isn't solely a genetic issue. We've identified an environmental factor, a specific type of radiation that's present here on Arcadia Prime. It's been slowly sterilizing your population over generations." The council erupted in hushed conversations, their calm facade cracking under the weight of the revelation. Even Seraphia's expression wavered, her eyes widening ever so slightly. It was clear that she had not expected this. "Radiation," Seraphia repeated, her voice quiet but filled with disbelief. "What are you talking about?" Dr. Harris activated the device, projecting a holographic display of the data they had collected. "This is a detailed analysis of your atmosphere and its interaction with your population's DNA. The radiation is subtle, but over time, it has had a profound impact on your reproductive capabilities. This discovery could explain why your genetic engineering efforts have failed to reverse the decline." The holographic display shimmered in the air, showing complex molecular structures and atmospheric data that the Arcadian Council members scrutinized intently. Ethan could see the weight of the revelation settling over the room. The truth was undeniable, and it offered a glimmer of hope that didn't involve manipulating human DNA. For the first time, Seraphia looked truly shaken. Her regal composure faltered as she stared at the data, her mind racing to process the implications. Ethan knew this was the critical moment. If Seraphia rejected their findings now, there would be no turning back. They would be forced to fight their way off the planet, risking not only their lives but the fragile diplomatic relations between humanity and the Arcadians. "We understand the gravity of your situation," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "But we believe there is a path forward. With Exonrian technology and our combined research, we can help you overcome this crisis, without forcing humanity into a position it cannot accept." Seraphia remained silent, her expression unreadable. The council, too, seemed uncertain of how to proceed. For several agonizing moments, the room was filled with nothing but the quiet hum of the holographic display. Then, slowly, Seraphia turned her gaze back to Ethan. Her eyes were no longer cold and calculating. There was something else there now, something that looked almost like resignation. "You have given us much to consider, Commander Grayson," she said softly, her voice losing some of its earlier sharpness. It seems we were mistaken in our approach. The survival of our species has driven us to make decisions that, in hindsight, may not have been the wisest. Ethan felt a small sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't a full concession, but it was a start. High Chancellor, we want to help. We understand the pressure you're under, but forcing humanity into a breeding program isn't the answer. Let's work together to find a solution that benefits both our species. Seraphia nodded slowly, turning to face the council. I will need to confer with the council, but I believe we may have a path forward. The council members exchanged glances before nodding in agreement. The tension in the room seemed to ease, if only slightly. It was clear that the Arcadians were beginning to see reason. Just as Ethan allowed himself to hope that they had averted a disaster, one of the council members stood abruptly, his face twisted with anger. This is absurd, the Arcadian shouted, his voice echoing through the chamber. We cannot trust these humans. They have meddled in our affairs, spied on our communications, and now they expect us to abandon our plans based on their unproven theories. Seraphia turned to the dissenter, her expression hardening once again. Councillor Marix, enough. These revelations may very well save our species. But Marix was not swayed. He glared at Ethan with barely concealed fury. And what if they are wrong? What if their so-called solution fails, and we are left with nothing but extinction? No, I say we continue with the original plan. Take what we need from the humans, by force if necessary. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He had known there would be opposition, but he hadn't expected it to be this aggressive. The situation was spiraling out of control. Seraphia raised her hand, silencing the murmurs that had begun to spread through the council. Enough, Marix. We will not resort to violence. We will deliberate on this matter with reason and wisdom. Marix glared at her but remained silent, though the tension in the room had thickened. The council was divided, and Ethan knew that the outcome of this meeting would determine the fate of not only his team, but also the future of humanity's relationship with the Arcadians. As the council began to deliberate, Ethan's mind raced. He had given them the truth, but would it be enough to change their course? Or had they already crossed a line that could not be undone? A tense standoff. As the Arcadian council members murmured among themselves, Ethan glanced at his team. Kara was focused, her eyes scanning the room for any signs of imminent danger, while Dr. Harris remained deep in thought, clearly contemplating the implications of their findings. Minutes passed like hours. The council deliberated in hushed tones, their voices low but intense. Ethan's heart raced with anticipation, every second feeling like a lifetime. He knew that Seraphia held the final decision, but the presence of dissenters like Marix was a troubling sign. Finally, Seraphia rose from her seat, silencing the room with a single motion. All eyes turned to her as she prepared to speak. After careful deliberation, she began, her voice carrying the weight of her authority. The council has reached a decision. We will accept the Xonrian offer and pursue the path of genetic engineering with their assistance. The humans' discoveries regarding the environmental factors affecting our fertility will be integrated into our research. There will be no forced breeding program involving humans. Ethan exhaled, a wave of relief washing over him. They had done it. They had managed to defuse the situation without bloodshed. But Seraphia wasn't finished. However, she continued, her tone more serious, we will monitor your progress closely. If we find that your discoveries do not lead to the resolution of our crisis, we reserve the right to revisit our original proposal. For now, you are free to leave Arcadia Prime. Ethan nodded, grateful for the reprieve, but understanding the unspoken threat. The Arcadians weren't entirely convinced, and they would be watching closely. But for now, the immediate danger had passed. Thank you, High Chancellor, Ethan said, bowing slightly. We will do everything in our power to assist your people in finding a solution. Seraphia inclined her head. See that you do, Commander. For all our sakes. As the meeting ended, Ethan and his team made their way back to their quarters, the weight of the past few days finally starting to lift. They had managed to secure a fragile peace, but there was still much work to be done. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time since they had arrived on Arcadia Prime, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. An uneasy departure. As the Voyager HFY shuttle lifted off from Arcadia Prime's landing pad, Ethan watched the crystalline city shrink into the distance. The golden light of the twin suns reflected off the towering spires and expansive green jungles, casting an almost ethereal glow over the alien landscape. He should have felt relieved, after all. They had just avoided what could have been a catastrophic conflict between humanity and one of the most powerful alien civilizations in the galaxy. But the weight in his chest didn't disappear as they ascended through the planet's atmosphere. If anything, the closer they got to space, the heavier that weight felt. Kara sat beside him, her gaze fixed ahead, hands gripping the arms of her seat a little too tightly. Dr. Harris was on the opposite side of the shuttle, reviewing the Arcadian data they had gathered. His face was a mixture of triumph and concern, as though he had won a battle but knew the war was far from over. No one spoke as the shuttle broke through the shimmering energy shields that protected Arcadia Prime. The sight of the stars spilling across the darkness of space should have been comforting, a return to familiar territory. But the silence in the shuttle was thick with tension, an unspoken realization hanging over all of them. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The shuttle connected with the docking bay of Voyager 2, and as soon as they stepped aboard, Ethan knew he had to address the team. He turned to Kara and Dr. Harris. "We're not safe yet." Kara nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I know. Seraphia may have agreed to let us go, but I don't trust her or that council. We exposed too many vulnerabilities, and they won't forget that." Dr. Harris chimed in, adjusting his glasses as he spoke. "The data we gave them might keep them occupied for now, but if they don't find the solution to their fertility crisis fast enough, they'll come back to us. And next time, they won't bother with diplomacy." Ethan agreed. The Arcadians were desperate, and while they had a temporary solution with Exonrians, it was clear their patience was razor thin. If the Exonrians' genetic engineering didn't work, or if they encountered any delays, the Arcadians might still try to force humans into their breeding program, whether by coercion or by force. Ethan sat down at the command console, opening a secure communication channel to Earth's Central Diplomatic Command. He couldn't afford to waste time. As the line connected, the familiar face of Admiral Suzanne Monroe appeared on the screen, her sharp blue eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of Ethan and his team. "Commander Grayson," Monroe said, her voice crisp and authoritative. "We've been awaiting your report. What's the status on Arcadia Prime?" Ethan took a deep breath before answering. "We've managed to prevent a diplomatic incident, Admiral. The Arcadians were on the verge of initiating a forced breeding program using human genetics. They're facing a fertility crisis, but we found evidence that their problem is related to environmental factors, not just genetics." Admiral Monroe's expression didn't change, but Ethan could tell she was processing the gravity of the situation. And what was their response? "They were reluctant to abandon their original plan," Ethan explained, "but we provided them with an alternative. The Xonrians, another species that's faced similar fertility issues, have agreed to share their genetic engineering technology with the Arcadians. For now, they've agreed to let us leave peacefully, but we've uncovered evidence that they've been experimenting on human DNA for years. If their deal with the Xonrians falls through, they may try to use us again." Monroe's eyes flashed with concern. "That's troubling. We've suspected for a while that certain members of the Galactic Federation have been less than transparent about their research. But this is the first confirmation we've had of human genetic experimentation on this scale." Ethan nodded. "It's not just a problem for Arcadia Prime, Admiral. If other species see humanity as a convenient solution to their problems, we could be facing a much larger threat than just the Arcadians. We need to be prepared." Monroe leaned back slightly, her expression hardening. "Agreed. I'll inform the Council of this development. In the meantime, I want you to return to Earth immediately. We need a full debrief and analysis of the data you've gathered. And Commander, good work. You've averted what could have been a disaster. The transmission ended, and Ethan sat back, exhaling slowly. Averted disaster, sure, but it didn't feel like a victory. The Arcadians hadn't been defeated, they'd merely been delayed, and Ethan knew they were only one of many species that might see humanity as a tool to be used. Kara approached, her expression concerned. Do you think they'll keep their word? Ethan shook his head. I don't know. They're desperate, and desperate people don't always act rationally. But for now, we've bought ourselves some time. Dr. Harris joined them, his datapad tucked under his arm. It's not just the Arcadians we have to worry about. If word spreads that humans are a viable solution to fertility crisis, we might find ourselves in the crosshairs of multiple species. The Galactic Federation isn't as unified as it seems. Ethan sighed. You're right. We've opened Pandora's box, and now we have to deal with the consequences. The unexpected interception. The shuttle docked securely with Voyager 2, and as Ethan and his team prepared for departure, the familiar hum of the ship's engines began to fill the air. They were finally leaving Arcadia Prime behind, but they weren't out of the woods yet. Ethan moved toward the main command station, ready to give the order to jump to hyperspace when a sudden alarm blared through the ship. The control panel lit up with a series of flashing red lights, and a message scrolled across the display. Incoming transmission. Unidentified vessel detected. What the hell? Kara muttered, rushing to her station to analyze the data. Her fingers flew across the console as she worked to identify the source of the transmission. It's not Arcadian, it's an encrypted signal. Hold on, there's a signature. Somrian.